For these 6 people, their need to be right and control others became an obsession that consumed their lives, from anti-vaccine crusades to essential oil schemes. These are the stories of Karens whose final confrontations ended in ways no one could have predicted. It was April 15, 2014, and the morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Children's Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, as dozens of protesters gathered with their handmade signs and megaphones. The 200-bed medical facility had become ground zero for a growing anti-vaccine movement, with demonstrators blocking sidewalks and harassing families seeking medical care for their children. The smell of hot asphalt mixed with exhaust fumes from idling cars as parents tried to navigate around the increasingly aggressive crowd. Cheryl Brennan adjusted her vaccines kill sign as she surveyed her followers from her position near the emergency entrance. At 43, the administrative assistant had transformed from a quiet office worker into the self-proclaimed leader of Arizona's most vocal anti-vaccine group, after spending countless hours reading conspiracy theories on obscure websites. Her conversion had begun 2 years earlier, when her youngest daughter developed a fever after routine immunizations, an event that Cheryl became convinced was evidence of a massive medical conspiracy. Cheryl's weekly protests had grown from a handful of concerned parents to nearly 50 dedicated followers who hung on her every word about the dangers of childhood vaccines. She had convinced dozens of families to avoid immunizing their children, leading to 3 separate measles outbreaks in local schools that had forced temporary closures. Her own 3 children had been expelled from their elementary school after she refused to provide required immunization records, forcing her to homeschool them using curriculum that reinforced her anti-medical beliefs. The hospital's security team had grown accustomed to Cheryl's increasingly aggressive tactics, which included following doctors to their cars and shouting at nurses through the facility's windows. She carried a bullhorn everywhere and had memorized dozens of debunked studies that she would cite during her confrontations with medical professionals. Her husband had left her 6 months earlier, taking their children and citing her dangerous obsession as grounds for divorce. That morning's protest had attracted local news coverage after Cheryl announced plans to physically block the hospital's emergency entrance during peak hours. She had spent the previous evening preparing inflammatory speeches and coordinating with her followers through encrypted messaging apps that she believed protected them from government surveillance. As the morning progressed, Cheryl positioned herself directly in front of the emergency bay doors, her followers forming a human chain that prevented ambulances from accessing the facility. When a paramedic unit arrived with a 7-year-old boy experiencing a severe asthma attack, Cheryl refused to move despite desperate pleas from the medical crew. Witnesses later said Cheryl shouted through her bullhorn, accusing the hospital of harming children as she blocked the ambulance's path. The child's mother could be seen pleading from inside the vehicle, but Cheryl refused to move, convinced she was protecting the boy rather than preventing treatment. In her frenzy to stop the ambulance, several of Cheryl's supporters helped lift her onto the hood of the vehicle as cameras rolled. She climbed toward the roof, gripping the metal light bar while shouting through her bullhorn. The surface was slick with early morning dew and vibration from the idling engine, and her sneakers slipped against the smooth fiberglass. As she tried to steady herself, she lost her footing and fell backward, striking the back of her head on the pavement near the curb. Witnesses saw her briefly twitch before going still. Paramedics immediately began resuscitation efforts and rushed her inside the hospital she had been blocking, but she was pronounced dead within minutes from severe traumatic brain injury. Cheryl Brennan's death stunned the crowd gathered outside. Within days, attendance at the protests dwindled, and several of her followers publicly distanced themselves from the movement she had led. The boy with asthma was successfully treated and made a full recovery. It was November 8, 2020, and the fluorescent lights of a grocery store in Tulsa, Oklahoma, hummed overhead as Tuesday morning shoppers navigated the aisles with their carts and shopping lists. The 45,000-square-foot store had implemented new health protocols during flu season, requiring masks and providing hand sanitizer stations throughout the facility. Signs posted at every entrance reminded customers of the temporary safety measures designed to protect the community's health. Diane Fletcher sat in her car in the parking lot, applying lipstick and checking her phone one final time before entering the store without the required face covering. At 48, the insurance agent had made defying public health guidelines her personal crusade, viewing every safety measure as government overreach that threatened her constitutional freedoms. Her social media accounts were filled with videos of her confronting store employees and deliberately violating health protocols while filming herself for her 3,000 followers. Diane's aggressive behavior had escalated over the past 6 months, resulting in bans from 4 different grocery stores and 2 pharmacies throughout Tulsa. She had organized freedom rallies in public spaces where participants would intentionally violate health measures, often targeting businesses that enforced safety guidelines. Her insurance clients had begun dropping her after videos of her confrontational behavior went viral. But Diane viewed their rejection as proof that she was fighting the right battle. Her morning routine now included planning which businesses to target for her daily protests, often choosing locations where she knew her disruptive behavior would attract the most attention. Diane carried a small camera everywhere, hoping to capture footage of what she called tyrannical enforcement of health measures that she could use to build her online following. The store manager had been warned about Diane's previous visits and had instructed employees to call security immediately if she appeared. Her reputation for aggressive confrontations and deliberate attempts to expose other customers to illness had made her a significant liability for any business she entered. Diane burst through the automatic doors with characteristic defiance, immediately approaching the customer service desk, where the manager stood reviewing the morning's sales reports. She announced loudly that she was there to shop without wearing what she called a communist face diaper, pulling out her phone to begin recording the interaction. When the manager politely asked her to leave, Diane began her usual routine of coughing deliberately on nearby customers while filming their reactions. She moved through the produce section, touching fruits and vegetables while coughing on them, her behavior becoming increasingly erratic as other shoppers backed away in disgust and fear. Security guards approached cautiously, having been trained to de-escalate situations involving disruptive customers. But Diane's behavior escalated rapidly as she began throwing canned goods at employees, screaming about her constitutional rights while continuing to film herself. Her face was flushed with rage as she grabbed items from shelves and hurled them at anyone who tried to approach her. In her fury, Diane knocked over a large end-cap display of glass pasta sauce jars, sending dozens of containers crashing to the floor. As she stepped backward to avoid the falling merchandise, a large jar struck her upper thigh and shattered. A sharp glass shard drove upward into the inner portion of her upper thigh, severing her femoral artery. Blood began spurting from the wound with each heartbeat as Diane collapsed among the broken glass and scattered canned goods. Her phone continued recording on the floor beside her, while employees rushed to apply pressure to the wound. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but Diane Fletcher was pronounced dead shortly afterward from massive blood loss caused by a femoral artery injury. In the aftermath, the store received several complaints from customers who said they had been deliberately coughed on during the incident, and security footage of her final confrontation spread rapidly online. It was September 3, 2017, and the bustling atmosphere of a busy airport in Colorado created a symphony of rolling luggage, flight announcements, and thousands of travelers navigating the 1.5 million square foot facility. The Labor Day weekend had brought record crowds to the airport, with security lines stretching nearly 100 yards as TSA agents processed passengers through metal detectors and baggage scanners. Tammy Rodriguez clutched the nylon leash of her 15-pound peacock as she approached the security checkpoint, her fake service animal certification prominently displayed on a lanyard around her neck. At 39, the real estate agent had discovered that claiming her exotic pet was a medical necessity allowed her to bypass restrictions that applied to other travelers. She had purchased the fraudulent documentation online for $200, complete with official-looking seals and medical terminology that intimidated most business owners into compliance. Tammy's aggressive use of fake service animal laws had become her signature method for getting special treatment wherever she went. She had successfully bullied restaurants, hotels, and retail stores into accommodating her disruptive peacock by threatening discrimination lawsuits and making scenes that managers preferred to avoid. Her bird had already caused incidents by attacking other passengers on buses and defecating in shopping malls, but Tammy's legal threats had prevented any serious consequences. The peacock, named Napoleon, was completely untrained and had never received any legitimate service animal education. Tammy had chosen the exotic bird specifically because its unusual nature made people less likely to question her claims, and she enjoyed the attention and special treatment that came with having such an unusual companion. Her social media accounts were filled with photos of Napoleon in restaurants, airplanes, and other locations where pets were typically prohibited. Airport security had been warned about Tammy's previous attempts to bring Napoleon through checkpoints without proper documentation. She had been turned away twice in the past month, but each time she had returned with increasingly sophisticated fake paperwork and more aggressive demands for accommodation. As Tammy approached the TSA checkpoint, she immediately began filming with her phone, while demanding that Napoleon be allowed through security without the standard documentation required for legitimate service animals. She shouted at the TSA agent about discrimination against her disability, though she had no qualifying medical condition that would require a service animal. The TSA supervisor explained the federal regulations governing service animals in airports, but Tammy's voice grew louder and more aggressive as she insisted that her fake certification was legally sufficient. Other passengers in line began backing away as her shouting escalated, and Napoleon became increasingly agitated by the commotion. Tammy screamed about violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, her face red with rage as she waved her fraudulent paperwork at the security officers. The peacock began spreading its tail feathers and making loud calls that echoed through the terminal, drawing stares from hundreds of nearby travelers. Napoleon's stress response to Tammy's shouting triggered the bird's natural defense mechanisms. The large peacock suddenly bolted away from the commotion, its powerful legs propelling it forward with surprising force. Tammy had clipped the nylon leash to her waist, and as Napoleon fled, the sudden jerk spun her around violently. The force on the leash pulled it upward over her shoulder and under her chin. The nylon line cinched tight against her throat like a garrote, tightening further each time the bird thrashed. Other passengers watched in horror as she clawed at the leash, her face turning blue as her airway was compressed. Security officers rushed to help within seconds, but they had no cutting tool readily available, and Napoleon continued thrashing, making it difficult to approach safely. By the time they managed to free the leash from around her neck, Tammy had lost consciousness. Despite immediate medical attention from airport paramedics, Tammy Rodriguez was pronounced dead at 2:34 p.m. from asphyxiation. The incident prompted calls for stricter verification of service animal documentation and clearer guidelines for handling disruptive animals in airports. Napoleon was euthanized, and investigations revealed that Tammy had no legitimate disability requiring a service animal. It was June 12, 2015, and the vibrant Saturday morning atmosphere of a downtown farmers market in Portland filled the square with the sounds of live music, chattering vendors, and families enjoying the Pacific Northwest's finest local produce. The weekly market featured over 80 vendors selling everything from organic vegetables to artisanal cheeses, creating a 2-acre outdoor marketplace that attracted thousands of health-conscious shoppers each weekend. Beverly Chen adjusted her reusable hemp shopping bags as she surveyed the market stalls with the intensity of a military strategist planning an assault. At 45, the yoga studio owner had transformed her interest in healthy eating into an obsession with pure organic food that she believed was the only safe nutrition available in a world she saw as deliberately poisoned by corporate agriculture. Her conversion to extreme organic-only eating had begun 3 years earlier, after reading conspiracy theories about pesticide use that convinced her that conventional farming was part of a plot to sicken the population. Beverly's weekly farmers market visits had become increasingly confrontational as she appointed herself the unofficial food purity police, lecturing other shoppers about their choices and harassing vendors about their farming practices. She carried a notebook filled with the names of farms she had researched online, cross-referencing each vendor's claims against her extensive database of approved organic producers. Her aggressive questioning had led to several heated arguments with farmers, who she accused of lying about their growing methods. The yoga studio Beverly owned had lost half its students over the past year As her extreme dietary beliefs began influencing her teaching, she would interrupt classes to lecture students about the dangers of non-organic food, and had banned anyone from bringing conventional snacks into her facility. Her own health had deteriorated significantly due to her restrictive eating patterns, but she refused medical treatment, claiming that doctors were part of the conspiracy to promote unhealthy food. Beverly's family had staged an intervention 6 months earlier, concerned about her dramatic weight loss and increasingly paranoid behavior. She had cut contact with relatives who wouldn't adopt her extreme dietary restrictions, viewing their concern as evidence that they had been brainwashed by corporate food propaganda. That morning, Beverly discovered that one of her trusted vendors was selling both organic and conventionally grown produce from the same booth, a practice she viewed as contamination of pure food with poisonous chemicals. She began her confrontation quietly, questioning the farmer about his growing methods while other customers browsed his selection of summer vegetables. When the farmer explained that he grew both organic and conventional crops to serve different customer needs, Beverly's voice rose to a shout that could be heard throughout the market square. She screamed about people being poisoned, pointing at the conventionally grown tomatoes as if they were radioactive waste. Beverly began grabbing conventional vegetables from the display and throwing them at other customers, screaming warnings about pesticide contamination, while the farmer tried to calm her down. Market security approached as her behavior became increasingly erratic, but Beverly was beyond reasoning as her obsession with food purity reached a breaking point. In her rage, Beverly grabbed the vendor's metal canopy support pole, intending to use it as a weapon against what she saw as the forces of food contamination. The heavy aluminum pole was unwieldy in her malnourished hands, and as she swung it wildly, she lost her balance and slipped on the vegetables she had thrown across the ground. Beverly fell backward with tremendous force, still gripping the pole as the canopy frame tipped with her. Both struck the pavement together, and the metal bar hit her head on impact, causing a fatal skull fracture. She never regained consciousness among the scattered organic produce she had been defending, her body surrounded by the vegetables she believed were humanity's salvation. Beverly Chen was pronounced dead at the scene at 10:15 a.m. from massive head trauma. Market staff later confirmed that she had refused all medical care leading up to the incident despite warnings about her deteriorating health. It was January 20th, 2018, and the spacious community center in Scottsdale, Arizona, buzzed with the energy of health-conscious residents attending the monthly wellness fair. The 5,000-square-foot facility had been transformed into a marketplace of alternative health vendors, with booths promoting everything from crystal healing to dietary supplements. The desert sun streamed through large windows as nearly 200 attendees browsed displays of natural health products. Crystal Williams arranged her elaborate essential oil display with the precision of a pharmaceutical chemist, each small bottle labeled with bold claims about its healing properties. At 41, the multi-level marketing distributor had built her entire identity around promoting essential oils as miracle cures for every conceivable health problem. Her transformation from struggling single mother to zealous wellness evangelist had occurred over the past 3 years as she climbed the ranks of her health product network. Crystal's aggressive sales tactics had destroyed most of her personal relationships, as friends and family grew tired of her constant pitches and dangerous medical advice. She had convinced several people to stop taking prescribed medications in favor of her oil treatments, including a diabetic neighbor who had been hospitalized after discontinuing insulin based on Crystal's claims that cinnamon oil could cure diabetes. The wellness fair represented Crystal's biggest opportunity to recruit new customers. She had prepared an elaborate demonstration designed to prove the safety of her products, planning to apply undiluted oils directly to her skin while making outrageous claims about their healing properties. Crystal's presentation quickly drew a crowd as she demonstrated increasingly reckless uses of her products, claiming they were completely safe. She opened several bottles of pure eucalyptus and tea tree oil she had purchased from an unregulated online supplier that advertised extra concentrated formulations. Crystal announced that she would prove the oil's safety by applying them directly to her skin, explaining that their higher potency made them more effective than standard aromatherapy products. She poured the undiluted eucalyptus oil across her forearms and rubbed it into her skin. Within minutes, Her arms turned red and began to blister as the concentrated oils caused chemical burns. The strong vapors filled the air, and several people nearby began coughing from the overwhelming fumes. Soon after, the high concentration and chemical impurities in the untested oils triggered a severe allergic reaction that quickly progressed to anaphylaxis. Her airway began to close, and her blood pressure dropped as she stumbled behind the booth and collapsed while bystanders called for help. Paramedics stationed at the wellness fair arrived within minutes and began resuscitation efforts, but Crystal Williams was pronounced dead at 2:47 p.m. from anaphylactic shock, brought on by exposure to undiluted essential oils from an unregulated source. The wellness fair was shut down immediately, and the incident prompted renewed scrutiny of unregulated essential oil sales and false health claims. It was March 7, 2013, and the austere chambers of a city hall in Texas, filled with the usual mix of concerned citizens and local activists, attending the monthly city council meeting. The 200-seat chamber echoed with conversations about municipal budgets and zoning issues, as residents waited their turn to address the council during the public comment period. Fluorescent lights reflected off polished wood surfaces while city officials reviewed their agenda items. Janet Morrison clutched her homemade protest signs as she waited for her turn to speak, her obsession with water fluoridation having consumed her life for the past 2 years. At 52, the dental hygienist had ironically become the city's most vocal anti-fluoride activist, despite her professional background in oral health. Her transformation had begun after reading conspiracy theories online that convinced her fluoride was a government mind control agent, rather than a public health measure. Janet's monthly appearances at city council meetings had become increasingly disruptive as she exceeded speaking time limits and interrupted other speakers with rambling speeches about fluoride dangers. Her former employer had terminated her after she began advising patients against using fluoridated toothpaste, leading to increased tooth decay in several children whose parents followed her advice. During the public comment period, Janet approached the podium with her large wooden signs and began her usual tirade about fluoride being used for population control. When the council president reminded her of the 3-minute speaking limit, Janet became agitated and started waving her protest signs while continuing to speak. Security officers approached to escort her from the podium, but Janet became violent and began swinging her heavy wooden signs at anyone who tried to remove her. In her frenzied movements, she stumbled backward while wildly swinging one of her large protest signs, losing her balance as she fought against the security officers trying to restrain her. Janet fell backward with tremendous force, striking her head against the marble steps leading up to the council chamber's raised platform. The impact caused severe head trauma, and she never regained consciousness despite immediate medical attention from paramedics who arrived within minutes. Janet Morrison was pronounced dead at 7:23 p.m. while still clutching pamphlets about fluoride dangers, her conspiracy theories claiming her life in the very chamber where she had spent years promoting them. The city council meeting was immediately adjourned, and ironically, Janet's death led to increased public support for water fluoridation, as residents rejected the extreme conspiracy theories that had consumed her final years. Thanks for watching. Click the next video to discover how far people will go to prove they're right.